So one of the things that Darren asked me to reflect on was what are some of the cultural planetary trends or happenings that I'm most excited about? So of course what came to mind is this whole Occupy energy, right? And of course Occupy is a problematic term, you know, because we have the occupation of Palestine by Israel and we have the occupation of Native American lands, you know, by the United States. But the energy is so profound. And, you know, and then there's problematic aspects of it, like, well, why do you really need to have tents in downtown Oakland, or why do you really need to have tents in Zuccotti Park? And is this becoming about scuffles with the police rather than the economic injustice of our society, you know? So there's complex aspects of this, but the energy, the consciousness is amazing. And it's amazing to have people like Michael Moore, you know, who've been politically engaged since they were 10 years old, saying, I've never seen anything like this. And I think it struck me just the other day. I think it was probably around the time that the site at Cal Berkeley got rousted, you know, and squashed by the police. And they said, okay, you jabbed some of us in the ribs with these batons, and you squashed our tents. But that's not the end of this movement. We're going to call for a general strike a week from now throughout the entire University of California's statewide system. And that's what happens every time. You know, you squash Occupy Denver, you bum rush Occupy Portland. And people say you can't evict an idea. There's something dramatic that's happening, and I think what the thought that came to me the other day is that this is what it feels like to live through a sea change of consciousness. You know, and I feel like I've been on the cusp of knowing what that feels like. And I think some of that is from being born in 1969. You know, a lot of my fellow astrologers are in the room, but I was born at the energetic peak of the 1960s. You know, Jupiter was involved in the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, you know, that happened from 1960 to 1972, and then that whole energy kind of crested in 1968 and 1969, and so you have these dramatic breakthroughs, but you also have these really traumatic times like King and Kennedy being assassinated just 2 months apart from each other. And so, but you know, so a lot of my life I feel like has been maybe because I was astrologically, energetically, archetypally imprinted with that energy in my soul at the instant that I was born. But for some reason, or maybe it's just because I had intellectual interest in social justice and changes of consciousness, but for some reason I've been interested for a long time in the 1960s because it was this moment where you had a sea change of consciousness. And Dr. King wrote about this. And this is part of what I think has been so fascinating as I've been delving into the work of Martin Luther King in his later years, is that he's writing about things that are so connected to what we talk about every day and every week in the Philosophy, Cosmology, and Consciousness program. In his last, you know, so there's two. If you want to really delve into the later works of King, you have to delve into the late speeches and the late sermons. But in terms of texts, there's really only two. And that's his last book called Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, which came out in 1967. And then there's a posthumous volume that came out that was a collection of 5 sermons that he gave in the last couple months of his life. In November and December of 1967, he gave the Massey Lectures. If you're familiar with any of y'all from Canada, or you know, every year they do the Massey Lectures on the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And so I think it's just a really powerful and beautiful synchronicity of history that just 4 months before King was assassinated, he's asked to deliver the Massey Lectures. And so it's a chance. This is a guy who, you know, traveled around and gave kind of a stump speech a boilerplate kind of speech, 2 or 3 times a day for 11 straight years, but he gets this opportunity in the last months of his life to give 5 speeches that go out across the airwaves in Canada, and they're the Massey lectures, and then when he gets assassinated, they get collected into this book that comes out in 1968 called The Trumpet of Conscience. And in that book, he's talking about, he says, so it's either in one of these 2 books, either Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community in 67, or Trumpet of Conscience in 68, he actually quotes Alfred North Whitehead.
Whoa.
Everybody in PCC is going like, oh my God, Whitehead. There's a lot to King that's, this is why we really should look at, I would just humbly suggest that there's a lot to be gained from looking into the last 5 years of his life. But yeah, in 67 and 68, he quotes Alfred North Whitehead, and the quote from Whitehead is basically that we're living through a time in which we're changing our basic outlooks. He's talking about worldview. He's talking about cosmology, if you will. He's talking about what's the big cultural story. And King is quoting Whitehead and saying, yes, indeed, we're living through a time in which we're changing our basic outlooks. And so a lot of my interest has been like, what are those breakthrough moments in society? If the status quo is unjust, if the status quo is sexist, racist, classist, homophobic, if the status quo is leading us toward ecological catastrophe, then what are those breakthrough moments? What are those breakthrough opportunities? What are those breakthrough messages, stories, artistic expressions that are going to help turn this situation around? And so I've always been drawn to these moments like February 1st, 1960, when 4 students decided to sit in Greensboro, North Carolina. And that led to a movement that within 3 months had spread across the South, 8 different states, 11 different cities, 50,000 people participated. And that started with 4 students. Howard Zinn talks about, Howard Zinn makes the point that before February 1st, 1960, there had been sit-ins in 16 different cities. And none of them had led to a mass movement. None of them had broken the Jim Crow apartheid segregation system in the South. So if these guys had used logic, they would say there's no indication that a 17th attempt is going to break. You see what I'm saying? But but as King said, there comes a time when time itself is ready for a change. So I've been going around for the last 15, 20 years saying, we need to planetize the movement. We need to look for these breakthrough moments. We need to be the change. We need to, and now that the atmosphere is shifting around us, such that. And I want to move on and say a few more poems before I take up too much time. But I want to make a point about the 1%. That I think has been missed or overlooked, and that is that it's such a powerful frame because it tells a story about the economic structure of our society that has been largely invisible. And I think people have rightly said, whoa, I'm about the 100%, or the 1% are people too, and this type of thing. So I want to make the point that what's brilliant about this idea of the 1% and the 99% is that it tells a story about the structure. It's not about the people. It's not about saying the 1% are them and we're us. You see what I'm saying? That's what's so brilliant and powerful about it, is that it makes, we talk about the power of story in PCC. In that one image, we are the 99%. That there's 1% that control this amount of the wealth, and we are the 99%. It helps make this economic injustice as a system and as a structure visible. So I think that's beautiful, and I think that's brilliant. And we need to remember that it's not about the people. The people involved in the 1% are our brothers and our sisters. But being able to name the system that we're locked in is actually very powerful and very important. So let's read a poem and keep things moving. Just see how much time. Okay, coming down home good. We need global citizens for some sit-ins again. We need global citizens for some sit-ins again. I say we all meet on Wall Street and lock the whole block down. I take exception to the rule of the greedy and the cruel. I take exception to the rule of the greedy and the cruel. This fall, school's in session and the lesson is Wall Street. It's time for action and your name's on the call sheet. It's time we all meet and name what it is. The game has been rigged to enrich corporate business interests that sent this economy spinning. Charlie Sheen is not the only clueless dude that thinks he's winning. See, the 1% done spent all the rent. See, the 1% done spent all the rent. And now the rent's due, so we're coming to a tent near you. We're the like-minded 99% standing up to corruption with loving dissent. We're the like-minded 99% standing up to corruption with loving dissent. We stand for justice and the future and all of humanity, embracing all people. Yes, even Sean Hannity. The message is simple. Greed, injustice, and eco-destruction have to go. Pay attention, corporate media. We'll try to say it slow. It's time to rock the nation, rock this occupation. It's time to rock the nation, rock this occupation. It's time for the people to peacefully fight back. Tell Congress and the media we're taking the mic back. Tell the jaded it's that long-awaited revolution. Put away the pepper spray and reread the Constitution. These cops are paid to go crazy, yo. But we're peaceful. Don't tase me, bro. We came to incite insight. We came to incite insight. Unite and discuss this. We came to hang and to bang the drums of justice. Let's occupy with our love and our light.
Yeah.
Let's occupy the earth and the sky and live with all beings as a planet-wide tribe. Occupy the divine mind residing inside.
Yes.
See, I'm the type writer that's known to light fires and prone to inspire the moment's own higher desire. Because history knows it's the time for resisting the team at the scene of the crime. Tell your friends I'll meet them there at Freedom Square. They can't stop us from Seattle to Chiapas. It's our mission to envision what comes after the catastrophe. How do we move past the capitalist disaster? Our communities need us. We are all leaders. How could we ask for anything less than the future?